Economic Policies in Eastern and Western Europe after 1945 by Conquest. In order to comprehend this topic, we must first understand the difference in Eastern and Western Europe. One credible difference has to do with waterways. Western Europe has an abundance of navigable rivers, coastlines, and harbors. Eastern Europe, however, is much further inland, limiting trade. Factors limiting trade also limit the growth of a strong, unified middle class in Eastern Europe. The most important aspect, however, is the difference in political structures. The East favored an authoritarian rule, while the West sought a more democratic leadership. As a result, this is a rough idea between East and West Europe. Post-war European history falls neatly into two periods. From 1945 to 1973, the countries of Western Europe recovered rapidly from the almost unimaginable devastation caused by World War II, and then took off, growing faster than the United States and more than twice as fast as their own historical trends. From 1973 to the present, their economies have struggled with low growth and high unemployment, lagging behind both international competitors and their own earlier success. As a result of this divided history, the so-called European model has both cheerleaders and naysayers. Social Democrats and others on the left focus on the first period, applauding the continent's ability to generate high living standards while cushioning individuals and societies from the ravages of unfair markets. Right-wing critics and free marketers focus on Europe's contemporary problems, arguing that the continent's generous welfare benefits and heavy regulation condemn it to continuing decline. Both views contain some truth, but since the same conditions that led to success in one era have produced problems in the next, neither interpretation fully explains the story. In the European economy since 1945, Barry Eichengreen, a professor of economics and political science at the University of California, Berkeley, presents not only a comprehensive account of Europe's post-war economic experience, but also an important analysis of capitalist development more generally. Drawing on his credentials as both an economist and a political scientist, Eichengreen argues that the key to understanding Europe's initial triumphs and later troubles lies in recognizing that the recipe for growth varies, depending on one's position in the economic race. In the years after 1945, Europe needed to recover from the war and catch up with the United States. This involves what economists call extensive growth, essentially increasing the number of workers doing familiar kinds of jobs. Large trade unions helped labor market partners reach and sustain long-term agreements to limit wage demands, ensure high levels of investment, and plan for routine industrial restructuring. Unions agreed to hold down their labor costs and in return were given many opportunities depending on the region. In Germany, there is the option to have representation on corporate boards. Sweden and France offered influence incentives of government planning and policy making. Lastly, Austria granted the ability to dole out government jobs and funds. Strong welfare states helped cement this bargain, providing workers with generous benefits to offset the wage restraint and the unemployment generated by industrial restructuring. Schools and training programs, meanwhile, were designed to turn out workers adept at handling existing technologies and equipment. Banks developed long-term relationships with their corporate clients, lending money for business expansion that relied on known technologies. And the government bureaucracies of nationalized industries helped mobilize and coordinate the resources necessary for the relatively clear-cut tasks associated with the catch-up growth. Economic development calls for much more than simply the unleashing of market forces. It demands institutions capable of generating resources, skills, and relationships necessary to handle the particular economic challenges a country has to face at a particular time. And by demonstrating how institutions helpful in one era can become counterproductive in another, there are still important lessons about the future to teach both policymakers and publics.